evening. Welcome to Truthzilla. I am Megan, sitting here with Scott and Ed. Today is a super special day. It is my oldest son's 21st birthday. I do.
It makes no sense.
So I am especially honored to welcome our guest to the show today. Cynthia Luxford is a she is now retired, licensed direct entry certified professional midwife. She began her career in 1989 and held positions on the Oregon Board of Direct Entry Midwives. She was an instructor at the National College of Midwives at the Birthing Way College of Midwifery, and she owned and operated a license-free birthing center from 2004 to 2015, which is where this wonderful lady helped me to bring my babies into the world. So welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Yay.
For asking me to join you on this great birthday.
Yay.
Years ago, good grief. Were you only 12 when you...
That's been the ongoing joke for the last,
no, I was very much a grown-up, but we're just gonna, I was his age. I was hoping that starting off, Cynthia, would you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started with midwifery?
Sure. I always answer that question by that I didn't choose midwifery, that it chose me. I just have always had this crazy interest in pregnancy and birth from the time I was a little girl. And it was something I thought all girls felt like. So whenever I would talk to my friends, or they'd be like, "Oh, it's gross." I'm like, "It's beautiful."
It's precious.
Like, wait a minute. Something different about the way I feel about this whole thing than some of my girlfriends. So then I realized it wasn't just because I was a woman that I felt like that. It was really something different about me. And when I had my babies, I had them at home with a midwife. And as soon as they were toddling around and old enough to, stay at home with their dad, I started apprenticing with that midwife. And so that was the beginning of my journey into midwifery.
Lovely. So, for most of all of the years, at least all the years during the time when I was having babies and we were in communication, if not all of the babies that you help mamas bring into this world were delivered at home. You probably had some experiences where you had to transport to the hospital, mm-hmm. Did you? And can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we, in the very beginning, of course, I wasn't quite as experienced, so I would take women in a little bit more frequently. Usually they would just give them some, augment their labor to get things going, and they go ahead and have their baby without having to have a C-section. But in the later years, I really only went in if there was just no other way that baby was coming out than to have the mom have section or have an epidural, because she was having trouble with pain. And my C-section rate was about 6%. And that compared to hospitals, which are anywhere from like 27 to 35%, is big difference.
Huge.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
In doing the research for this episode, like, I have to admit, I don't have any kids, and so this was literally so new to me. Like, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff, and in some of the preparation for this show, I was blown away by it. And I imagine our audience, in the conspiracy community, I'm not sure, you know what I mean? Just maybe they have no idea what a midwife is either. Is there maybe a way we could just take it back, maybe just explain what exactly what a midwife is, I guess?
And also, I really want to touch on too, because I know that there's like nurse midwives, right? And we're talking about hospital associated midwives, and I really want to focus on home birth midwives. I really want to. I mean, obviously that's what we're doing, so definitely want to touch on that.
No offense to our audience either. That was a bad joke.
Well, yes, there are two different types of midwives. So there is a nurse midwife, and those are they're nurses who have gone on to have a lot of extra education to become midwives, and they generally work in hospitals. Some of them do work out in the community, and they do out of hospital births, but it's really way more common for them to practice in hospitals. Then there's what we call direct entry midwives, and those are midwives like I am. So I didn't go to a nursing school. I don't have any nursing degrees. I went straight into studying about having babies, working with a midwife, and learning hands-on the whole way about birth. And so Oregon in 92 decided that they would go ahead and offer licensing for us, which was good and bad. You know, there was an Oregon Midwifery Council at that time that was certifying midwives. So they were really, really pretty much like above the curve in the United States to get midwives kind of accredited. So they would actually test them. So this council would get we had a certain number of births that you had to attend. And I think that at that time it was 25. So once you'd attended 25 births, you could go, no, it was 50 births, you could go and sit for the exam. So it took 2 days. It usually took about 14 hours to take the written exam. And then the next day you'd come back if you passed your written exam, and then you would have an oral exam. So I sat for that and got my certificate. And then the next year we moved to licensure, and the state was so impressed with the testing that the council was using that they used the same test. So it was really, really a comprehensive thing that we went through. And then we were grandmothered in. So all of us who already got our certificates from the Oregon Midwifery Council were able to be licensed without taking the special state test, because it was the same thing. So we all got grandmothered in, those of us that were certified at that time. And then the National College of Midwifery, which gives us the CPM, or the Certified Professional Midwife, is also another separate certification, and it involves the same kind of testing. So they went ahead and said anybody who's already licensed in their state can get their certificate from NARM, because some states don't license, and so there was a real need for there to be some kind of a certification process for midwives that didn't have that in their state. So NARM took up, and they started certifying midwives all over North America using their tests and their credentials, and so that really helped a ton. Most CPMs and like midwives practice outside of the hospital. Some of us would go ahead and start birth centers and practice in those. We really couldn't practice in hospitals because we didn't have any privileges there. So once we brought our moms into the hospital, they became hospital patients. We became support people. Depending on the hospital, depending on the doctor, some doctors would go just kind of step back, and if things were going good, let us go ahead and continue and catch the babies and be with their mommies like they wanted us to be. But others would be like totally treating us like, we couldn't even come in the room. And, this one nurse was totally rude to me and wanted me to stand out in the hall. And the mom was saying, no, I want her with me. I want her with me. And I finally went in and I said, she wants me here. I'm here. And then she was rude. And I just said to her, I don't really know why you have such a problem with me. She goes, well, and then she started saying that I had brought some people in, a mom in, like a couple of weeks before that had some weird thing I'd never even heard of. She says, with +4 meconium. I'm like, that isn't even a thing. And I didn't bring anybody in. And so I don't know what her deal was. She was just really, really rude and evil. And that was in the very beginning. That was right when I very first got licensed, and the community was just starting to get to know who I was. And towards the end, no problem. I could walk right into the local hospitals with my moms, and the nurses and the doctors were happy to see me. They knew but my moms were really well educated. They knew that they were going to be really decent and polite, and know that if we were there, that we needed to be there. It wasn't going to be a big fight like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have an intervention now. It's like, well, you kind of need an intervention now. So that's how we would handle that.
Gotcha.
So does that explain a little bit about the difference between midwives?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think that, so the point that I really want to make is a normal, healthy birthing mom, what can she, if all, and like until I got pregnant with Baxton, the only thing I knew of was, hospitals were the safe, clean,
Right.
healthy, right way to go. If you were a righteous parent, you certainly, had your baby and, strapped down to a table in the hospital and started loading them up with vaccines right away and all that. So I was a bad parent right from the jump.
That you were.
But I am wondering, can you, like, if just for our audience to have an idea, most people probably only have experience or have heard of a hospital birth. If a woman's coming to you and looking for care, what could she expect that would be different, or what could she expect kind of overall? What does the process look like for her?
So it's so different. Each appointment that I have with my moms lasts usually about 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like tons of talking and getting to know each other, getting to know your family, your pets, your whole house. It's like making a new friend. And on top of that, then you get tons of education about your pregnancy. You get lots of informed choice. So there's things that you can't even say no to if you're going to a medical care provider. But when you're seeing a midwife, you have choices, and you don't have to do every single thing that they tell you to do, that they just need to check the box so that, okay, she got the shot, she got the test, she got, So you have a ton of choice. The care is, the continuity of it is amazing, because you're not going to have to worry about, well, when I go into labor, am I going to get you?
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
You're going to. And then the midwife will be with the mom through her entire labor, as long as the mom really needs her to be there. I've been at some moms' houses for 60 hours waiting for the baby, and other times I've barely made it, or I've been riding in the car with them when they were in labor.
We remember that, Cynthia. So don't push, we're almost there. Yes.
There. I kept saying, do I need to pull over? Do I need to pull over? So it's just so much more personal, and you get so educated that by the time you're ready to have the baby, you just aren't afraid, because you have so much information that it makes it just like a normal, ordinary thing that everybody just does, and you're ready to go. We did do testing. We did do blood work for moms to make sure that there wasn't any issues with the iron deficiencies or, really out of whack sugars. We did do a urine dipstick every time, just to make sure that there's not anything going wrong with too much protein in the urine or sugar. The testing that I always did was just the basic, like, looking out for the mom and the baby's health. It wasn't anything that it was like, okay, now it's time for your flu shot, or it's time for
or we have to do an internal exam this time. Like, that was a big thing, like, especially as a brand new, first time pregnant mama. Like, I was very in tune with my body, and I knew for sure what I did and did not want to have happen to me. And you supported me right from the start. Like, we are not going to need to do that. I'm here to support you, and you're the mommy, and this is your body, and I'm here to be with you through this process and help you learn what's going on with you. And it was, the best experience.
Yeah, it's very non-invasive, but super hands-on. I mean,
Yep.
It's like there's a difference, it's like
It's really mommy-ish. It's mommy-ish. It's very nurturing, and like you say, you become like part of the family. Like, you're helping women to have birth, in their living rooms, right? Like, with if we want it, right, our other children are standing, and it's calm, and it's and nobody's jerking the baby out of my arms and clipping the cord, which we're gonna get into.
Oh, we're gonna get into some good stuff, folks.
But it's gentle, it's soft, and it's very pure. There's not any. I think the big thing for me is there's no trauma happening to mommy or baby. There's no, beginning life trauma happening, and that's something that you cannot find almost anywhere in life. And to give them that best possible chance for, like I say, for normal birthing women with healthy pregnancies, this is I couldn't.
Even if moms had complications and things that we had to deal with, like get on it and take care of it, afterwards they would not even sometimes know that there had been a problem, because really worked on just remaining really calm and doing what we needed to do and not freaking anybody out. It's just because most of the stuff isn't like a big freak out. It's, well, this is something a little different. So this is what we do. And, you're just super calm about it. You don't want to start yelling, freaking everybody out. So.
And not everything that happens is an emergency.
Right. I did have a mom come in to see me later in her pregnancy, and she was switching from a doctor to me. And when she was in labor, she showed up. I'd only seen her a couple of times, and she showed up to have the baby, and he was breech. And when he was born, her labor was really fast. It was her second baby. And while he was being born, he had his arms like up behind the back of his head, which is really not a good thing. They shouldn't be doing that. So we had to reach up and pull his arms down and help pull him out. And when he came out, I was just like, oh no. I thought he was not alive because he was so pale and so still. But I went ahead and did the resuscitation and just touched him and did a little bit of breathing, like the CPR that we do, and he just came right to and pinked right up. And it was amazing because she didn't really think that was anything wrong. She was just like, oh, my baby came out, there he is, he's breathing now, he's crying. And she was so thankful, because if she had gone to the hospital, the baby was born so quick that it would have been a nurse dealing with her birth. And I don't think that the outcome would have been the same.
I agree
and
with you.
She totally thought that too. And she says, I know that I was just meant to be here to have this baby, because otherwise I know we wouldn't have had this good outcome. So
well, they take it to such severe intervention right away. Such severe intervention. Right. They traumatize the babies immediately, and they want to shut down. They're breaking their bonds apart immediately. They're cutting that cord, and they're causing what could be it's just a mild little to be like a medical emergency.
Yeah, because if his cord had been cut right away, that was his lifeline. Yep. He was still connected to the placenta. He was still getting oxygen from mommy, even though he was laying there. He was on the floor because she wasn't on a birth stool, and they had covers and stuff on the floor. So he was on the floor, cord still giving him all this oxygen. Yep. And then I just gave him like really just one breath. We call it a prana breath, so it's just like an opening breath. And I didn't use a bag and mask. I used my mouth. And it was just this warm, to me, I didn't like using bag and masks on babies because it's just personal, and it's this weird plastic object. And if you're doing it with your mouth, the baby's got this warmth, this love. It's like a kiss. It's like, come on, baby. Yep. And you feel that air go in, and the baby just like, there they are. Yeah. So it gets about it.
I get teary when I think about it. So it's precious moments.
Yeah. You would miss out in a hospital. You miss out on that stuff. It's just so.
You do, and so so I sat down with these guys like a week or two ago, and we watched The Business of Being Born.
It was so eye-opening. I seriously, like I said earlier, I had no idea about any of this stuff. There was so much in that movie that just really was shocking. And was also just very eye-opening. Everybody out there, I definitely recommend watching it. Business of Being Born. I couldn't believe it. I walked away from that like, oh my God. One of the big things about this show in particular is we've been going hard against big pharma, the medical establishment, vaccines, things like that. Because there's so much corruption and evil going on. It's very clear. In the world we live in today, it's so clear that's. The agendas and all the it's just for profit at the expense of the citizenry, basically. And so we've been attacking them on the vaccine thing over and over and over and over, and that's what everybody in the alternative media community is doing is we're trying to crush big pharma on the vaccine angle, and so we thought this would be an awesome episode. Megan had this great idea.
I was like,
episode.
So do you know what they're doing to mommies and babies,
and
guys?
It's like we can attack them now from this angle, because this, I had no idea. This is a serious. It's heartbreaking, and it's scary, and it's just evil.
Yeah, it is, and it's the very, very beginning of a person's whole life, and they're taken and being completely traumatized, and that's been going on for many, many, many years. It's just the normal thing to happen in our country, and it's not good at all. One of the reasons that I stopped working was because the licensing rules were making it pretty impossible for me to practice in a holistic and loving way. They were requiring so many tests. I mean, when I started, there wasn't anybody looking over my shoulder. We were completely autonomous. We took care of our moms. We knew what was good and what was bad. We transfer them out if there was problems, but it got to be more and more and more and more oversight. So to the point where we couldn't even, like, if a person had the Oregon Health Plan, but they wouldn't pay me, I couldn't even accept payments from them if I didn't have the right form filled out because I was contracted with the Oregon Health Plan, with Medicaid, actually. I mean, it was just getting worse and worse. I was going to have to make everybody have an ultrasound, like 2 ultrasounds in their pregnancies. I was going to have to make them have a Group B strep test, which we always waivers.
Which
for that.
an ultrasound is a terrible intervention. I mean, if you don't have to have an ultrasound, I mean, and that's a whole nother thing. We could go into a whole nother episode about that, but we know that it's horrific.
Yeah, it's all these things, and then. And if the mom did test positive for Group B strep, then we had to give her IV antibiotics during her labor. I mean, it was getting more and more and more and more medical. And I was just like, I can't even go there. And if we had our parents signing an informed consent, but the state didn't like our informed consent, then they would refuse to pay me. So they were just tying our left and right.
And we're talking about, too, I mean, and just in terms of payment, like, so what you're offering is women to have essentially the freedom to choose a way that they need and want and are made to birth, and the ability to bond with their newborns in a real and wholesome way, in a way that is opposite of the PSYOP that goes on at hospitals, right? We're cutting babies out. We're breaking, bonds right away. We're having mothers that don't bond with their babies. We're having, mothers who don't care to breastfeed because there's no instinct, right? So, I mean, I'm sure there are people who argue with me, but I'm ready for that argument. However, And really what you're offering is birthing freedom and this mothering, wonderful, wholesome environment, which at a tiny fraction of the cost of what it costs a woman to go to the hospital and be medically intervened with from the moment, even if we only talk about fetal monitoring, right? If that's only as bad as it got, and most cases that is not as bad as it gets. And they have no problem paying these $15,000, $30,000 hospital bills to cut babies out of their moms, but for this small fee, and really this feeds into what the medical community and what the government at large does, which is to cover up and oppress the things that are actually healing and helpful. And is their agenda to break up the family? Is their agenda to break up the family bond? And they want to start it. And I'll go back even to amniocentesis, right? We're poking babies in the womb. So, anyways, but.
Keep going. Yeah. Love it. Love it.
And it's so true, because I had so many clients that would refuse to have the PK, or not the PK, there was a test done, an alpha fetal protein test, the AFP test. That is the one that would tell you if your baby had Down syndrome or not. That thing is notoriously wrong. So women would make a decision.
Coronavirus test?
They get that test around 15 to 16 weeks. It's like, okay, well, you have really high levels. So unless you knew the date exactly, because it's a test that's based on the exact part of your pregnancy that you're in. So if you're a little farther along and you get this test done, it could be a complete false positive that your baby probably has Down syndrome. So then the next thing is to go at 20 weeks. So you wait a whole month and you go have an amniocentesis done. And then they check to see whether the baby really does have Down syndrome. And that whole time in between, it's like a tentative pregnancy. These women aren't sure they're going to keep their baby. They're not sure their baby's okay. They're not told that test is probably wrong and your baby's probably just fine. They then have lots and lots and lots of ultrasounds to check that out. And my moms would almost always refuse to have that AFP test because it was ridiculous. If you have a baby that has Down syndrome, you will know when the baby is born. And
Well, that's really the big push. That's the agenda, to further and normalize. This is something different. This is something wrong, and therefore we need to kill this baby, because heaven forbid this baby be born different than the rest. And that's really the agenda there. Them scaring women into thinking there's something wrong with their babies, or their babies are sick, and you might as well just cut them loose. While you don't have to think about it. They're inside of you. Just cut them out and kill them, and that's fine. And that is a huge part of the agenda.
Yeah. Because I had a mom who did have, she went ahead and had the testing done because she was in her 40s and it was her first baby. The doctor that did the test, who was even a naturopath, is telling her, well, it's probably, you probably do have a baby with Down syndrome. And I'll just tell you how expensive it is to raise a child with Down syndrome. He was trying to tell her to think an abortion. So she has the ultrasound and she sees the baby, and I thought she was going to have an abortion. I was like, okay, this I don't even know what to do to keep her going. And she came back to see me after the ultrasound, and I said, I was just kind of like, so now have you made a decision? And she's like, absolutely not going to have an abortion. As soon as I saw the baby on the ultrasound, it's one good reason for an ultrasound. I said, no way, I'm having this baby. And he did not have Down syndrome. He's beautiful, and he been aborted. It's lots of babies are aborted that are perfectly fine,
right?
Whose moms probably have.
Well, and we've really been conditioned as a society again to that. I think that we're to be such a first world country and so rich as we are, and this really is that psychological conditioning that there are just some human beings that matter less, or that are not worth as much, or that will not contribute as much, and so therefore they're expendable. And that all plays into this medical darkness. It's like they want to wipe off. I mean, we could take this into any level of the medical community that we want, and we know that, and we all know that there's good doctors on the front lines, right? If we're in a car accident, we want to have a good surgeon. If there's a medical emergency, we want to have a good obstetrician. But barring that, it's a nightmare death squad. It really is, and it just reaches up. It started broken. They wanted it broken. They need us sick. They need us to doubt ourselves, and they need women to rely on them and help us to thin our population down by killing our babies. So there you go.
No, I mean, I just think, the point you brought up earlier, you're a holistic, you're doing this holistic. I mean, that's kind of the war we're seeing with Big Pharma right now, is they're shutting everything down. It's the same thing that Miriam was talking about a couple weeks back, with the Operation Quack Hack. They are shutting down anything that doesn't fall exactly into their way of doing things, and their way of doing things also happens to be very profitable for them. They have set it up so when the moms come, they come and they do their system, and we can look at all the data. I mean, we've seen the data. When the babies are born, they're born between 9 and 5. When these doctors, it's
right before dinner.
Yeah, it's like it is happening at the convenience of the doctors, and those right before you hit 5 o'clock. That's when you're going to see the most cesarean sections. I mean, that's like these things. It's a broken system, but it's also people have been playing into it so long that they're a part of it, Well,
and then women are choosing it too. Like in some states that's a big deal, right? And designer births and picking your push date and all of these things. And I've read women getting tummy tucks at the same time. Like it's just completely removed from and as a woman, I will say, from taking power away from a woman, from taking a woman's true strength away from her by dumbing us down, by numbing us to it, by making us think there's something wrong, by making us think that we can't do it. And that really does set the tone, I think, for mommies going into motherhood who were holding this baby and, hey, I couldn't even do this. I couldn't even do this without help. And so what are my chances, and probably not going to be able to breastfeed. And I just feel like it goes deep.
So we had our two babies. We had them at a birthing center, and the birthing center here in Springfield, and I'm not even sure if it's still there, but I believe it is.
Probably
but it might be closed because of the same reasons you were talking about. They have made it more difficult on them. But anyways, we had to watch videos and take classes and all this stuff, and I was blown away just in that setting, just all what I learned, and just the percentages, like you were talking about, how percentage of people that are not having cesareans in the birthing center just versus the hospital, and I mean, I was kind of the guy on the other side, and I wish I would have listened to their mother more, because she was the one wanting to have the home birth, and I was honest, like, I'm just being honest, like,
You didn't know yet.
I didn't know, and once you have the knowledge, that's the key. That's why why we talk about this stuff, because when you have the knowledge, it is, like the data says, that it is safer for you to have a vaginal birth than a cesarean birth. A cesarean birth has way more complications. I mean, that is a major surgery. So if you're thinking about in terms of the baby, it is safer to be having that baby with the midwife at your home. Like that is the data will prove that.
Yep.
You don't have to, like, you can look that up on your own, but we've all looked at the data, and that's for sure the truth on that one.
And what were we just looking up too? We were saying that of the 20 richest, am I right? Okay, out of the 20, you say it.
America spends, and I'm pretty sure this is up to the minute stats, but America spends $80 billion a year on hospital births, which is by far the number one, the most amount of money spent in any country in the whole world. Now, out of the 20 richest countries in the world, America has the 20 out of 20, the very lowest infant mortality rate.
Yep. Worst infant mortality. Well, why would that be? I wonder. Maybe it's because we're cutting healthy babies out of healthy birthing mommies, and we're running into a whole lot of problems. Or, I don't even do that. I don't know. And this is something I meant to check before I came on tonight. I didn't, but Cytotec, I remember that being a big deal, because it wasn't Cytotec. And that was a drug to induce labor, same as like Pitocin is commonly used, but wasn't Cytotec specifically labeled by the FDA and said not to be used? Am I right? Not to be used in birthing mother because it was causing placental ruptures. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And I remember there were families going to the FDA, and I remember seeing footage. This was like some years back. I couldn't find it again, where they were standing outside of the FDA going, "Look, my daughter died. The baby died. You guys see that it says on the charts that Cytotec was used. What are you guys going to do?" And the FDA was like, "We don't regulate doctors. It's not our job to regulate doctors. We just pass policy." And that, so, sorry.
So it's off-label use. It's for ulcers is what it's for. But it happens to have prostaglandin in it that will cause the cervix to ripen and will cause contractions. So doctors were like, OBs were like, "Hey, we should try this on our moms and see if it'll help them have their babies." Well, it'll cause contractions, but you can't stop it. It's not like giving someone an IV that you can turn off, discontinue, and stop the Pitocin, and then the body will take over. The Cytotec, once it's in there, it's in there. You can't stop it. So it can cause a contraction that will last like 3 minutes long, and then get very little rest, and then here comes another contraction, and the baby cannot maintain its circulation with that kind of pressure, because every time that a contraction lasts that long, it cuts the circulation up to the baby because it's so strong. And natural contractions that women have to birth their babies do fine with it, and it usually maybe lasts for 2 minutes at the most, out of a really, really hard contraction at the end of labor, but not like during dilation when you're trying to get the labor going. So it's killing babies and moms. It's awful, and they're still using it all the time. Just yesterday out here in Lincoln City at our hospital, they lost a mom and a baby, and I can't even imagine exactly why. Somebody I know was there and told me some things about it, and I really believe it had to do with Cytotec, and it was awful. So mom and a baby right here in our little town were just lost yesterday.
So Megan, you were saying that this is something that you heard about a long time ago, but you're saying now this is still something that they're using?
Yeah, I mean, and I say like within the last 10 years,
okay,
but I mean, they don't necessarily just abandon their terrible practices. I mean, right? Sorry.
I'm just saying they're still using it, and sometimes they'll even give it to the moms to take home and take it every 6 hours. They're just come back and start having contractions.
But see, the thing is, though, but the woman, just the creation of a woman, we are biologically made, right? Our brains and our bodies, as we get nearer to when, there's this number that the doctors don't have on their calendars. but that your body has, that knows when that baby's supposed to come, when all the lungs and all of and everything is happening, the immune system, everything is where it's supposed to be, and your body's going to produce those chemicals to cause your uterus to start contracting in the way that it should, and in a way that is not harmful to your baby. And so we're just completely bypassing all of this under the guise of this being the safer, cleaner, better way. And I think, and many women don't know, and the truth is they've been terrified into, it's too scary, your hips aren't wide, and that's a big BS claim. I remember when I was pregnant with Baxton, even 20 years ago, they were saying, well, we might need to measure your hips. No, we're not. No, we're I don't think so, because right, and the woman's body, right, we're made like our hips will kind of like the joints loosen up. I remember calling you like, I hear like crunching and popping. You're like, I know, honey, that's your ligaments. It's doing what it should. So but will you talk a little bit about the scopolamine, the twilight sleep that they were using?
Started this all.
That started, well, yeah. So let's talk about how much the medical profession cared for women starting off.
Oh my gosh, they really make birth happen quickly to not interfere with their day. Seriously. So let's just put this mom out. We'll get her completely out so she doesn't remember anything that we're doing to her. She's not really out, because she's going to scream the whole time.
She's going to feel what's happening.
Yeah, she won't remember
But she won't remember.
And then pull the baby out with forceps. So this was happening probably at least 70 years ago, up until it probably did start to, not be used at all by the time like I was born. I don't think they were using it at all. But when my husband was born, his mom had scopolamine. And she would say that she didn't remember anything about his birth until one time after she was starting to get a little bit of dementia. She said to me, she was here during the time that we were having a baby in the back room in the birth center. And she said, I came out and the baby had been born. Everything was over. She says, that it's over. She was so quiet. And I said, yeah, they're pretty quiet. She goes, well, I screamed and hung on to the side of the bed. And I'm like, yes, I'm sure you did. So she was remembering it all those years later.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible experience.
Yeah.
So,
well, they would ban the husbands from the delivery room, and sometimes they would leave these women. Right? Yeah, they would use lamb's wool, didn't they, to keep them strapped down, because otherwise it would leave marks on their wrists and legs and ankles, and their husbands would want to know why, and leave them laying in their feces and their urine, screaming out in pain, but knowing they wouldn't remember, so it didn't matter.
No, they could just and really there was no, let's get the mom up and be active. Let's get her to move around. Let's help her out. Let's help her get this labor going. It was like they had no clue what was really going to help labor.
Right.
And they didn't know, or one of the things that I remember hearing about at a conference was that obstetricians used to be kind of felt like second-class citizens as doctors, because they really didn't do anything. They just caught the babies. The women did all the work. They wanted to be surgeons, and they wanted to have prestige. So they started to intervene so that they actually do the doctor thing. They didn't have to just stand by and they got to cut people open, and they got to give them drugs, and they got to control the whole experience. So I think that is probably very true, is that they were just like, oh man, being an obstetrician is just sort of like embarrassing. We want to be a real doctor. Yeah. So let's start doing all these women.
And they took away this inherent gift and this ability for women to do what they were always meant to do, that had nothing to do with, because pregnancy isn't an illness, and birth isn't a medical emergency. And that is the part that has been perverted from society's awareness. So,
and although we don't maybe use those exact same practices, like I think the foundation of how women are treated in hospitals kind of stems from that at this point. I mean, I haven't been to a birth in a hospital, but are women, they still sit like, I know when the birthing center, you move around, you get in water, you do what works for you and what the baby's telling you to do. Like that is how a woman should birth a baby. Mm-hmm. Now is that in a hospital, or do they have that kind of freedom anymore?
Not if you have an epidural. If you have an epidural, you're numb from the waist down and you can't walk around.
And
There
so
you
now we're
are.
slowing down labor, right? You need to be able to move. You need to be able to get that baby down in your hips the way it should and help that baby turn. And putting women flat on their backs is just about the worst thing you can do to a mommy trying to push a baby out.
Yeah. And they will be like waiting to give you the epidural. Women will have their birth plan. I know you guys talked about birth plans. They'll have their birth plan all figured out. I don't want any drugs. I just want to have my baby naturally. And nobody cares. As soon as the woman starts to make noise and be uncomfortable, then the staff is uncomfortable. And it's so stupid. They're there helping women birth every day. Why does that make them uncomfortable?
Right.
So they want medications, mostly because they're probably kind of understaffed. So they watch women from the desk. They have their fetal monitors lined up at the desk. They watch their babies' beats from the desk. So if they can put everybody on an epidural, then they don't have to go to their bedside and help them because they don't have any pain now. And they can just watch the baby, make sure everything's okay. And that's how they do their job anymore.
But oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I was going to say, and strapping those fetal monitors to them increases the risk that there's going to be an intervention. And giving them the epidural immediately increases their risk that they're going to have a surgery delivery now. And that is another part of this whole, I mean, it all just fits very diabolically into a nice little pie of corruption against women and their babies. And what ends up happening is they get women in there, and this was the big thing that scared me when I was looking at choices, 21 years ago now, was I didn't want to be in a position where, like you talked about, maybe there's like an issue, maybe a little something comes up, maybe the baby's not turned right, maybe the baby's breech, maybe the baby's not breathing, maybe, my blood pressure gets a little high, whatever it may be. I didn't want to be flat on my back and have them telling me, but this is what's best for your baby. And knowing in my human mommy body that that's not true. Like my baby doesn't need forceps. My baby, I don't need an epidural. You don't need to cut me open. And know that my body can do this and have the benefit of like, okay, well, the baby's breech, can we have oxygen ready just in case? Can we just we make sure not to cut the cord, and that's another thing. If your baby's born in distress at the hospital, that's at least up to within the last decade, the first thing they do is cut that cord. Yeah. That's the very first thing they do. And their trauma, And what they really need to do is leave that baby right there. And so that was a big thing for me. I didn't want to, and I knew I didn't want some doctor telling me what, and guilting me and taking my voice from me. I didn't want to be in a vulnerable position, have someone tell me, well, don't you care about your baby? Aren't you afraid for your baby? Well, this is what I suggest with my medical opinion, knowing in my heart of hearts that it is not what's best. It's scary, and that's how they really can get women and their partners into terrible positions in the hospital. And I'm not saying that all obstetricians and all doctors are this way, but by and large, this is the vibe of the medical community.
And it's a broken system.
And it's very broken.
Yep. It's a broken system, and it comes down to the same thing you were just talking about, sitting with all the monitors and whatnot. I always equated it. It's like running a restaurant. Mm-hmm. It's like you want to turn the tables over. Yep. It's like they are trying to get these women in and out of there as quickly as possible so they can free up those beds so they can have another women come in. So they're maximizing their profit and they're minimizing the time. They're minimizing the amount of work they have to do, really, too. They're trying to get out and get home to their families and whatnot. But if the system didn't incentivize them that way, I mean, you can look at the graphs of like when women are born at home births, when they are birthed, it's not the same. They're a lot more even. It's all over the place. I mean, and you look in the hospitals, it's like, wow, they must have a lot of 9-to-5ers there. I mean,
and from Monday to Thursday, so right in the middle of the week.
Sure, yeah,
and
certainly.
That's such a good point, man. Like at the end of the day, it is a business, and it's a business that requires a profit. I mean, it's probably one of, if not the biggest businesses in the world, right? Just the whole medical field, right? And so, by virtue of that, right, just from day one of medical school, it's like that's what we're gonna aim the teaching towards, right? Is to formulate your mind and the curriculum around the end goal being this is a business. Yep. And you see that in the vaccine world, and it's like, so one of the things that stood out in the Business of Being Born movie is they went to a lot of nurses and they said, have you ever seen a baby being born or something like that.
How
And they're like,
often do you witness a natural
and they were
natural
like,
birth?
They were like, I don't know, like once.
Like
And it's
never,
it's
rarely.
they just completely keep that whole idea of that away from them. You know what I mean? And so it's just an indoctrination. And so, you know, so much of the pushback that we get nowadays when we talk about vaccines or we talk about like anything related to the current stuff going on in the world, it's always, you know, medical intervention. You know, big pharma's here to save you, and then and you hear that from all these doctors and experts that have been indoctrinated into that too. But you know, obviously there's a lot of experts and doctors that are speaking out against on the opposite side too. And I'm sure that there's a lot of doctors and nurses out there that would completely advocate and be on board with what we're saying too. But I think that, you know, also it's not even really their fault. You know, that's what the schooling and the medical field, for my opinion, it is geared towards. It is how to groom these people to be the best employees for big pharma that you could possibly get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. You know, one of the things that we've kind of been hinting around, but like one of the most important things is when these babies are born is that golden hour right after they're born, and just what happens in a hospital setting versus what would happen with you, Cynthia. Would you give us a little bit of how the difference of that?
Sure. So I can say that in the first hour of a baby under my care, I don't even touch the baby, really. If I don't have to, I don't even touch it. That the mom is going to be holding the baby, the placenta. If the placenta comes, then I wrap it up in a chucks and set it next to the mom. I help her get out of the tub. If she's still in the tub, we put it in a little placenta pan and let it float there while she's holding the baby.
Or walking the baby around with someone with the pan behind me. It happens.
So it's really, really important that baby gets to try to nurse as soon as possible in that very first hour. So that baby is at mom's breast. The baby is completely with mom. I don't have to take the baby away and dry it off and put it in the warmer and dry it off. Okay, so the hospital, cord gets cut, the baby gets taken over to the warmer and gets dried off and get all checked out and poked and suctioned and all kinds of rough treatment. And it's like, oh, but it's cold. If they take the baby's temperature, like the baby's cold, I'm going to give the baby to the mom. She's hot. She's like a furnace. You just push the baby out. She's super hot. Give that baby to mom. That's exactly where the baby needs to be. That's why mom is so hot, so the baby's nice and warm. You know, so that first hour to me was just completely precious. I wouldn't look and tell you what your baby was, whether a boy or girl, because a lot of times parents didn't know before they had their baby. So for me, one of my very favorite times of the whole birth was like the first few minutes after the birth, when nobody knew if it was a boy or a girl. It was just a baby, and it was their beautiful baby. And then it was like, oh, what do we have? Is it a boy or a girl? And somebody would check. But it wasn't me. I would be like, oh, it's a boy, and show them their baby's crotch, like some of those pictures that you see. The doctor's like the big girl. Oh, here's your baby girl that I delivered.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
So yeah, that first hour, nothing. I didn't really do anything. I would change blankets if mom was out and sitting on her bed, or if we got her out of the water, we'd make sure that we give her lots of nice warm dry blankets and keep changing those, and just observe and just see how beautiful it was. A lot of times I would just completely leave them alone. If everything was cool, mom wasn't bleeding too much or at all. Most times moms weren't bleeding hardly at all.
Yeah.
I could leave the room and just let them be a family together with their new baby. Yeah. And it's just the most amazing bonding time for parents. And the baby will have their eyes and look into the faces of
That's
mom and
the
dad.
big thing.
That's a big.
Yeah, I remember, and just calm. They respond to being talked to, because and the whole time, right? They're in sync with mom's heartbeat. Mm-hmm. They're in sync with our voice. They intuitively they know our energetic vibration, and so the very best place for that baby, especially if there's any kind of a hiccup, is against mom. Is against that heartbeat. Is against that warmth. Is against that energetic field, because that baby is bonded to that entity, and it's And as much as a woman bonds with her baby while baby's in utero, when that moment happens, when all those endorphins are dropped, when that baby is out, I'm not going to cry, but that is bonding. That is
Sure.
the ultimate bonding experience. And those kind of things really need to happen. The baby doesn't have to be, like the big thing, like you were saying, like clean them off, clean off the vernix. Like it's not dirty. It's not dirty. There's nothing wrong. You love them. You rub it in. It's okay. They just came out of your body. This is what it is. And it's not scary. It's not dirty, and nothing's wrong. And in fact, this is everything that's right in the world. So.
Yeah.
Mostly it's just so much more peaceful, and still sticking with not doing interventions. If I have a baby, that I'll watch and make sure that the baby's breathing fine and not struggling, not having any trouble. I'll listen to the baby's heart, make sure everything sounds good and that baby's heart rate's where it should be. But if I see the baby's breathing normally and I listen with the stethoscope, I hear the baby's heartbeat is good, I just back off and I'll just let the mom deal with the baby. It's not. There's nothing more I need to do. It's all mommy.
Well,
and dad.
Two of mine were born in the water, and I remember that being like the most magical, like the perfect transition, like from womb to a watery, warm environment. And I just remember holding, like Jolie under the water and just looking at his face and being able just to bring him up. And we're both smiling. So, I don't want to do it ever again, that said, but but it's so magic when it happened then, and I still remember it. So
it's just something that you never forget. And I love that women can have those kinds of memories for their births. Probably, I don't know how many women I got to help, about 700.
That was going to be my next question. My next question was going to be how many total versus how many interventions. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
About 700, and so 6% of those were transfers, and pretty much every transfer was a C-section at that point, because in the beginning maybe they weren't, but after I got really a lot more experienced, that was the only reason to take someone in, is if their birth just wasn't happening. And most of the time I think it was sometimes psychological. Sometimes the baby really was in a really funky position and just wouldn't turn, and there wasn't anything that we could do to get it to turn anymore, and the mom was getting super tired. So we would just talk about it and make the decision to go in if that was the case. And those births always were good, because the hospital was happy to receive them. The moms were in good shape. The babies were in good shape. It didn't wait till I was seeing tons of meconium and the baby was crashing and then race to the hospital. We went with time. So
the mom was still in control of her own birth at that point too. I think that's a big piece of it. When you get to the hospital, they're deciding when you have that cesarean. When you go to have a cesarean with your mothers, they are in control of that decision.
So here's according to parents.com here real quick. So 20% of deliveries are nudged along with Pitocin. More than 35% involve episiotomies. Up to 15% enlist forceps or a vacuum, and more than 25% end as cesareans.
So let's just talk about the forceps and vacuum producing babies with cerebral palsy. And I have a dear friend who had a baby in the hospital when she was a young mom, very young, a teenager, and didn't know anything. And there was heavy intervention, and she had a baby that was medically injured and had cerebral palsy due to forceps and vacuum, and she ended up losing her baby some years later due to that injury that was at birth. And so this is very, very serious stuff. When we're talking about these numbers, I think that there's just been a huge, smear campaign against, the huge smear campaign for, 50 years against, midwives and women birthing at home, and whether or not it's safe, and whether or not, midwifery is, a skill that can be utilized safely with, birthing mothers. And I think it's important to keep the truth alive. The
data proves it.
It absolutely
the data
does.
absolutely says it's the safer option.
It is. And I know we've talked about it, we've touched on it several times, but would you explain in your own words the importance of the umbilical cord staying attached until there's no more pulse? Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I went beyond that. So you can stop feeling a pulse probably after about 5 or 10 minutes. But I would wait until there really wasn't even any more blood in the cord, because the baby's heart, the baby's going to keep pumping that blood into its system from the cord. The baby needs to have all the blood it can get to have enough blood volume to have good blood pressure. So babies that are born and they cut the cord, they cause hypovolemia. They'll cause shock in babies, because the babies actually are born with like a hemorrhage, because a lot of their blood is still in the placenta and in the cord. So they don't give the baby a chance to pull all of their own blood back into their body. And it helps to make sure that the alveoli in their lungs will fill, the capillaries will all fill with blood, so they can actually take a nice big breath and breathe well. When they do that, so the fetal circulation, there's a little valve in the heart called the foramen ovale, and when the baby's a fetus, that's open. So all the blood just doesn't get shunted to the lungs at all. So when the baby's born, they take a breath, and then that valve is shut, and then their lungs need to fill with blood. So they need extra blood to come in and fill up their lungs. So when you cut the cord, you take away the ability for the baby to get that extra blood volume in there so that they can breathe well. So NICUs can be filled with babies who have breathing problems, who have shock from a low blood pressure, just because you cut the cord, like the minute that they were born. So hospitals are waiting like a minute, which probably helps, but it's still not enough. So I would wait till all the blood was gone. The cord, when the baby's born, can be about as big around as your thumb. It's really big and fat. But by the time a couple hours pass, it's just super thin, like a piece. Sometimes it's just like a fat shoestring. There's hardly anything left to it. So all that blood gets to be put into the baby. It's pretty an amazing thing. So it's just very important to me, babies get all of their blood and all of their stem cells. So that's, you can take stem cells out other people. You might as well let the baby have all of them to start.
Yes.
But there's so many other people that pay a lot of money for those.
Yes, so many. So that's it's just really important. And the other thing is to just not something that, every time that I have cut a cord for a baby, even after I've waited a couple hours, the babies almost always cry when the cord is cut. And I don't think it's because it hurts. I think they just energetically know that part of them is not there anymore. It's an interesting thing,
But I think you're right, though. I totally think that you're right.
Yeah.
I believe. I mean, I've been a mama with babies that went through this whole process a couple of times. I agree, though, that energetic thing, that whole, the psychology, the spirituality behind, most of the things really that any of us talk about on this show, but and this in particular, it's everything, and anything else is the smoke and mirrors of it.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah.
So I would like to touch on one piece, and this maybe as the man I shouldn't be going into this, but
I think I know where this is going.
Let me just preface this before I get going. So I want to talk about the breastfeeding piece.
Oh, yay! Okay, good.
And so it is so important that baby, when it's put on the mother's chest, it climbs itself up to the breast, and when that baby latches on for the first time, that kind of sets the tone of breastfeeding in general. Like this is known. It sets the tone. But also, I think it's just another conspiracy within a conspiracy that, they tried to give formula for years and years and years. That was the correct way to do things. And, the data shows today we know that breastfeeding is way more essential than formula. It's And you can look at the data of the first 6 months. If someone exclusively breastfeeds, like how much, it's going to do more than any vaccine will ever do. I can tell you that in disease prevention. Like it is known. And I will say, my preface is that as the man, I watched, when I saw breastfeeding happen, I thought the baby just gets on there and you go, right? No, it's insane. It's totally insane. And it is, I've heard women say that it is the biggest accomplishment of my life was breastfeeding my child. Like that's how big of a thing this is. So I don't want to pretend like I am like not giving this what it is because I haven't had to do it and I can't be there, but at the same time I was able to support. I was driving in the middle of the night to pick up mother's milk from other mothers and just to help facilitate that because I knew how important it was. But within that, they'll send you home from the hospital with formula.
Yeah. Similac and Enfamil will send you formula in the mail.
Yep.
I don't know how they find pregnant women. You don't have to sign up with them. They will send you formula in the mail. If you shop at Motherhood Maternity,
we got it too.
They will find you. Yes.
And on top of that, though, they will sell you mother's milk at the hospital, but it is so unreasonable. It's insane. It's like I can't remember how much money it was, but it was we can't buy the milk from them because we would just go broke in a week. That's how expensive it was. So
I think there's some validity to. And feasibly there are plenty of women who can't, for a multitude of reasons, breastfeed. But I will say, as a woman who's been among women for around 40 years now, that I think that we're lied to. We're lied to about the importance. We are lied to about what breastfeeding does for how it's psychologically amazing for the mom. How it's the number one best nutritional thing that you can do for your baby. You're talking about transferring antibody. You're talking about boosting their immune system. Not to mention the ever so crucial bonding that the government at large would love to see us abandon altogether. They'd love to see us further break apart the family unit. And so it's not so much about women that choose not to do it. It's more that women are choosing not to do it based on false information and repressed information, and really being fed an agenda that is, and I'm gonna say it, whoever it pisses off. I think it's the feminist agenda to separate women from their rightful power. And it's power, and it is not something that needs to be leveled out or dumbed down or taken away. It is absolute magnificence in its purest, beautiful form to give life and to be able to nourish and sustain that life. We're made to do it, and so it's important. I know you agree.
I thought about it a lot when I was nursing my own babies. It was like, this is so amazing. The baby grew all that time inside of my body, and now the baby's out, and the baby's still growing from my body. Yep. This is so cool. Yep. It's just the way it's meant to be, and it's completely amazing. And some women do have some difficulties. Babies might have a little tongue tie.
Yep.
There are issues that you might have to work through with that baby, but you just have to be really determined and just stick with it and do it and not give up. And that's the other thing about midwifery care. The postpartum care is amazing.
Yes.
My care was way over the top, but I'd come see the mom every day for the first 5 days. Mm-hmm. Then I'd go again at a week and at 10 days and at 2 weeks. Those visits were super important. And for me, it was to really help those moms get their breastfeeding established. Sure. At 2 weeks, a lot of times the baby will go on a weird growth spurt and start to cry all the time, and the mom thinks that the baby's hungry, so she'll start giving it a bottle. So I really made sure I went at that 2-week appointment to encourage her that it's okay and keep breastfeeding that baby. Yep. But that support that you get from a midwife or a doula or whoever you might have that comes to you after you've had the baby is super important. I want my moms to stay down, to just do nothing but take care of that baby, nurse that baby, learn the baby's cues, get it all figured out so you know exactly what you need to do for your baby and for that particular baby.
It's true, and that support for breastfeeding, whether it's, I think, as a woman to have a motherly figure, whether it's your midwife, your own mother, a sister, an aunt, a grandma, someone, because for me, and I was very much into holistic, and I wanted to breastfeed, and I was terrified. I remember with Baxton, happy birthday, Baxton, and I'm sorry if you hear this and you're embarrassed, but I remember calling you, like, I have blood blisters. Is that okay? Because I'm bleeding when he nurses, and I want to die. I would do childbirth all over again if I didn't ever have to. But I just stuck with it for just but a moment. And it was great, but really there were times too with with Maddox where I struggled, and he was crying a lot. And I couldn't get him to get a good latch, and it was really through that support and that encouragement of someone who knew and was motherly and was very much calm about it, to where when my anxiety was up, or a new mom is worried your baby's crying, they're not latching on, what am I going to do? And to have that support, because it would have been easy for me at any point, especially as a brand new mom, to have given up. And I am so forever thankful that I did not. But had I, and there are many women who don't have the support, they're not given the information. So,
and this comes back to also though, beyond just the family, that it used to be. I mean, it takes a village. They would have assistance of other women that would help raise these babies in past times and whatnot. And it, like, in more modern days, they've had things like, have you heard of like La Leche League, or where these groups where just women helping women to breastfeed and just assist each other. And I think that's something you almost have to seek out today. You're not going to get that assistance from the hospital, from that Western medicine system. This is the holistic way, and the farther we go, I feel like everything we see, that this holistic way is the right way.
Yeah, it is.
It's the right way.
Absolutely, and the further we move into this whole hospital thing, just like I said, having come into this particular topic over these last couple of weeks, not really knowing much about it. The light started coming on once I started to notice that all the pieces fit into the agenda I knew from other elements too, where there's darkness surrounding it. There's I dare to say like Luciferian elements to it, whether you're talking about like abortion or vaccines or transhumanism or whatever it is. This particular issue, the business of having children born in hospitals, it fit like a square peg in a square hole. Like it just fit exactly up. It's profit induced at the expense of us, and there's like almost like some dark elements surrounding it. It's really, really, and that's how I knew we were onto something, and because it just fit. It just checked all the boxes.
Yeah.
Well, Cynthia, is there anything that you wanted to add to wrap it up? Is there any final thoughts you wanted to impart? I'm so thankful that you came on today.
You guys pretty much covered. I mean, we could talk for a long time. How many hours we spent talking about topics. We could talk about all.
I want to talk about circumcision in the future, but we'll edit this part out for right now. But we're going to broach that. Just thumbs up or thumbs down. Is it good or bad? It's not necessary, right? Not necessary? Just totally torture, strap them down to a board and slice part of their sexual anatomy off?
Only cosmetic, completely cosmetic. Because you want the baby to look like that, right?
Well, so the thing is, though, we're talking, and so the thing is, and a lot of people think that, it's not a big deal, they don't remember. That's the argument. We can edit all this out, but I'm going to say that they don't remember. But really what's happening is there are deep psychological wounds happening, and when you start looking at children growing up, no one's asking what about sexual repression, what about sexual identity, what about people that grow up to desire really violent sex. I mean, this could go deep, and it is a big deal, and it is absolutely cosmetic. And when you talk about doing it to little girls in this country, everyone loses their friggin' minds. But in any other country where they're doing it to little boys, they're doing it to little girls too, and it's completely normal. So why is it normal here? And you're right, it's only cosmetic. So, anyways, but
I would just say, as a man, like, that was a very difficult decision. It does seem, just like you said, that's what Dad, you want to follow, but like, it's here. We're here to dive right into that stuff. We're going to dive right into it. We're gonna touch it, because I feel like this stuff is really important, and there is some psychological and things about it. And the reason it always comes back to some simple things to me is like, why do I believe the way I believe? Like, why? If I can actually question that, and if I don't have a really good answer, if it was implanted by something else, then I have to do more research.
Well, and I think it's important, and maybe I'll just leave the circumcision comment at this. If you're talking about, even if you want to break it down into a human that can't remember, if we're going to blanket it underneath that, but still during that moment, children and infants, they don't process time in the way that we do as adults. They don't have a concept of time. And so what is a fraction of a moment to us, it can be an eternity to them. So essentially what we're talking about is an eternity of severe physical torture, whereby the child is so traumatized that essentially they scream through the entire procedure, mommy's not coming, daddy's not coming, there's no concern, there's no caring voice or hand. They're strapped on a cold backboard. And then by the time that baby is delivered with, his genitals all bandaged up and bleeding and sticking to his diaper, he's now cried himself into a traumatic state that his mother now cannot recover from. And he will go home and he will learn to do all of the things that children do, and that wound will be deeply within his psyche for always. And it's important to weigh those decisions about, like, why as a culture do we do the things that we do, and is it worth it? Because, and I've read, threads, not lately, but in the past, of men whose parents didn't make that decision, and then they grew and opted to have that surgery. Which again, in my mind, I'm like, but it's not like, if it's not done as a baby, that it cannot be done. Right. And so therefore, what's the justification? And so that was another thing too, when you and I talked some 21, 22 years ago initially, and I was like, well, I was reading, like, if you're looking for a home birth midwife, ask these questions. So I have my little on the down low list. What is she going to say about cutting the skin off of his penis? Let's see if I'm going to hire you. And then you were like, yeah, no, that's terrible. And I was like, yes, you. So anyways.
Oh, God.
Cynthia, it's been so wonderful. Oh, go ahead.
Making a choice to permanently alter another person's body.
Yes.
That is not your body, not your choice, not your choice to make.
Right.
So that's that child, when he grows up, wants to be circumcised, he can always get circumcised, but he can't get his foreskin back.
Right.
Right.
And often they botch that. Right? They cut too deep, they cut too much. And all the studies I've ever read, if you want to talk about, sexual performance or sexual feeling, uncut men tend to report that they have higher sexual feeling. So, I mean...
if I could say, okay, so every morning I wake up, right? I get up and I get a cup of coffee, and I kind of get ready for my day. And then I sit down and I just thank God every day that my parents circumcised me when I was young.
Well, there's
arguments we have in the car.
Oh my God, Scott, you need to look a little deeper, bro.
I know.
You need to look a little deeper.
I appreciate his honesty.
Thank you, Mom and Dad. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I'd like to say, that since our cesarean section rate in the United States is like 25 to 35%, there's another issue that I've always thought correlated with that the rates of molestation of girls is at about 25 to 30%. So if we have girls who are growing up being sexually molested, they are going to have a really difficult time giving birth, because that is a part of their body that has now been defiled, it's made dirty. It's something that makes it really hard psychologically for them to push their beautiful baby through this dirty place.
Right.
Really addicted for that. So I feel like that, although and that's why they need interventions, because there's just nothing happening. They're not going to be able to do it. When I have moms that have had a history of that, I know that trauma is there. And so we talk about it during their pregnancy. We really, really support them like crazy during their labor to help them go ahead and give birth. And then when they give birth, it's like it purifies everything. It's like now all of that sexual trauma can be starting to heal, and sometimes it's completely healed through their birth. So it's a pretty amazing thing. But I think when you're in the hospital, they don't have time to deal with that. If you're having trouble with your contraction, your labor, they don't want to talk about psychology and why you're having that trouble. So they end up having C-section. And I really think that's a big part of our high rates of C-section.
Wow, I'd never thought of that.
Yeah,
before.
I'd never put that
really,
together
really
either.
But
really definitely. Yeah.
Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for coming on and
you.
talking to us tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lovely to see your
Certainly.
face.
Yeah.
I miss you too. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cynthia.
Have
Really
a wonderful
appreciate it.
evening. Wait, can I just say, when you said, I just want to say, I get up every morning. I thought you were going to say you get a hard on and you don't have to see it peeking through the force. I literally thought you were going with the hard on thing, and that's why I looked at you. I was like, oh my God, he's really going to go there. You're like, I get my cup of coffee. I was like, oh shit, what's he going to say? And then you're like, and I'm thank God. And I'm like, that's what he's going to say. That's not what I thought you were going to
There's that
go.
too. I wake up every morning and thank God I don't have to look. I'm sorry, anybody out there that's not circumcised. I'm sorry.
No, but like seriously though, you don't have to that's exactly how I thought until I had to make a decision for my son.
Yeah.
And then it's not just my decision anymore.
Well, see, I grew
And then you have to question the thing I said. Is you have to fucking go there and you go, why do I believe the way I believe? And if you go and ask the people the same thing we just talked about, the people I asked my friends who were not circumcised, and they said, I love not being circumcised, and I would not let anybody fucking touch my dick.
Yeah.
And and I said, well, fuck, it's not my decision then.
Yeah.
I've met girls that are like, it's so gross.
But that's because they're programmed.
I agree with you. It's 100% programming because I was never taught that, right? Oh, let me take that back. So my father apparently was uncircumcised, and my mom, I had a really super abusive father, right? He used to hospitalize my mom, and he raped my mom. And so I remember her talking about how dirty he was and how gross it was, but I don't think it had anything to do with him actually physically. I think it had to do with what he'd done to her body and her mind, and so therefore anything was gross. So I grew up being told, like, my brothers were all circumcised, and you know that was a big thing with my mom. She was like, "Well, are you going to circumcise?" I was like, "Boy, you have to circumcise. He has to look like his dad." Oh, it doesn't look good. That was big. It doesn't look good, and that wasn't a true enough reason for me to do. And I knew I wouldn't do it, but the moment I held him too, I was like, I'll be dead before anyone cuts him up, right? Like that's not gonna happen.
And I didn't get to say it in the episode, but I think, well, but I am so glad for Tina and women like you that because literally I was just like Scott. No offense.
No, dude, hey.
No offense, dude.
I could feel the awakening happening.
But seriously, I had to she stood her ground. She stood her ground and said I'm not going to let you do this without you doing research.
Yeah.
You don't get to make this decision. I want you to call X,
Tina.
Y, and Z and before you do it. And after I called people that were close people to me that had a different perspective, I couldn't do it.
Yep.
I was I would be being selfish at this point.
Yep.
And it comes back to that same thing, though. The same thing we come to over and over. Why do I believe this way?
Yes,
Total
I love that.
Why do I believe this way?
Dude, that is the fundamental foundation of this show, man.
Yeah.
This is the Truthzilla, man. For this whole time, we've mentioned on the show too. When I first met you,
yeah.
I'm all about 9/11, Tower 7, freaking Nazi bases on the dark side of the moon, freaking all that shit, dude. I'm totally down. But then Ed starts talking vaccines, and I'm just like, yeah, but vaccines, it's like the science is settled.
But they're helpful, right? The science is settled.
Oh man!
Knowing you, I can't even imagine that was ever in your
I know,
head
but see,
now.
I never even took the time to do it. It's kind of like flat Earth too. It's like one of those things I hear a lot of people saying, once you go down the flat Earth path, there's no going back, and you will believe that it's.
That's the thing.
And I was it's the same thing with vaccines too. I was just I just never took the time to go down that road. But during this last year and a half, dude, I've gone down that road.
And that's why we're here because for me it was the vaccines, for you guys whatever it was. But once you see how much they can lie to you, I'll look at flat Earth. I'm not gonna say I know because I know they would lie to me about it. Yep. That's what I'm convinced of.
Yep.
I don't know. I haven't done the research.
I haven't gone to that one either.
And I know that science, they buy out scientists all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and people generally have, we see the world as we are. And by and large, people have good hearts. By and large, even if some of us were raised with totally shitty opinions and shitty biases, and some of us were raised with, or families that spoke of people in a way that was racist, that maybe we didn't even realize that wasn't, okay until we were older. We all came. I'm completely lost my train of thought.
Well, we came from, I mean.
What were you just saying?
So whether it's
the flat Earth and
basically,
basically,
matter if you come from darkness or you come from a bad place, or
Damn
you have goodness in your heart. You have goodness in your heart.
I mean, what I think is what I was hearing. Where you get at was that we think of the world in terms of like, hey, the people around us are mostly good. We mostly have good intentions.
And so we assume that there's good intent aimed at us.
Yes,
We assume that I would never, like, you can't imagine, like, okay, I'm going to take this really quickly, like the O.J. Simpson thing, right? There was like this huge thing, like, well, he couldn't have done it, which he 1,010% did, and that we could do a whole other episode on that. But so O.J. Simpson totally knew his wife was terrified of him and terrified of blades, and he murdered her. I digress, but people didn't want to believe that because it would have involved mass conspiracy. It would have involved a number of people all telling the same kind of story, and people couldn't wrap their minds around that. And if you look at that on a governmental level, if you look at that on a global level, people, that's the big deal with this COVID bullshit. People do not want to believe and simply cannot accept that those people who are meant to lead us and uphold our rights and to look out for us and to oversee things would want anything other than our prosperity. And the truth of the matter is they want everything but our prosperity.
I would consider this, I'd almost coin this, it's the psyop of the yin yang.
Yeah.
It's like I've heard people tell me this, most things are good. So there may be a little bit of bad, but like most people are moving in the good direction. But it's like that's the whole psyop because the bad in there can dictate all the other shit around it. Yeah. They set up the systems and that's so. There's evil throughout, but there's a whole bunch of good people around doing evil. They just don't even fucking know it.
Right. Yeah, we'll just give you a $1,200 check, and then everything's good. Right?
Yeah. Stay home. Put your mask on. Put your mask on inside your house.
God. All right. I feel like we need to fill the bonus episode right now. Yeah.
Okay. Are we gonna? Well,
let's wrap this one up.
Okay. Let's wrap this up.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It was amazing to talk with Cynthia Luxford. She is an incredible woman, beautiful human, very, very accomplished.
How fantastic was it to have her on?
Awesome.
I'm just cutting you off. Sorry, we were blessed to have her, and thank you for coming on.
OG
Cynthia.
Truthzilla Mind Militia too.
She has been a warrior.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you for supporting our show this whole time. And like it's just like it's so fun to see your interactions with the stuff that we do, stuff that we put out. You know what I mean? Like especially on our social media. If you're not following us, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, hop on it. It's fun. We have a lot of fun.
So thank you, Cynthia. You're a warrior for mommies and babies and a wealth of knowledge for all of us to pick up and run with. I am Megan.
And uncircumcised penises.
So we'll talk about that later with Scott.
I had to.
I am Megan. I am sitting here with the lovely Scott and the beautiful Ed. We wish you all intellectual prosperity. Good night.
Good night. Damn.